I'm Sarah. I'm 48 years old. And as the humid June air clung to my skin, I gripped the folding chair beneath me, terrified that if I stood up to cheer for my son, the oversized graduation gown I was wearing would shift and reveal the 6-month secret that was kicking my ribs. My husband. David was sitting right next to me, gripping my hand, tears of pride in his eyes as he watched our youngest boy, Tyler, walk across that stage. David leaned in, whispering over the applause, "We did it, Sarah. We're finally done. It's just us now." His words felt like a physical blow. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled, and suddenly a sharp, rolling pain shot through my lower abdomen, stronger than anything I'd felt in the last 20 years. I gasped, doubling over, and the heavy black fabric of my gown, the one I'd borrowed from the faculty closet under a lie about being cold, slipped sideways. David looked down, his eyes widening in confusion, then horror, as he saw the undeniable, hard curve of my stomach pressing against the silk. "Sarah." He choked out, his voice cracking. "What is that?" I opened my mouth to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But the world suddenly tilted on its axis, and the sounds of the cheering crowd faded into a high-pitched ring. Just before I hit the grass, I thought, I've ruined everything. Please be aware that this story touches on the anxieties of a higher-risk geriatric pregnancy, the fear of family rejection, and the emotional toll of keeping a life-altering secret. If you've ever felt like you were carrying a burden so heavy you couldn't breathe, please hit that like button to show you're listening. To understand why I was lying on a football field, praying for the ground to swallow me whole. You have to go back 6 months. I was 47 then, and life was supposed to be winding down. David and I had spent the last 2 decades grinding him at the firm, me running a catering business that kept me on my feet 12 hours a day. We had raised 3 boys, and Tyler was the last one. For years, David had a countdown clock on his phone labeled Freedom, ticking down to Tyler's graduation. He didn't mean it in a bad way. He just meant that we could finally sell the big house, move to a condo in the city, and travel to Italy like we'd promised each other on our honeymoon. Then the fatigue started. I assumed it was the stress of the holidays, or maybe the catering business finally catching up to my joints. Then came the missed periods. I didn't even buy a test at first because, at my age, you don't think baby, you think menopause. I made an appointment with my gynecologist, Dr. Evans, expecting a lecture on hormone replacement therapy and hot flashes. I was sitting on the crinkly paper of the exam table, staring at a poster about bone density, when Dr. Evans walked in with a strange look on her face. "Sarah," she said, closing the door softly behind her, "we got your blood work back. Is it bad?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Is it early onset osteoporosis?" She shook her head and sat down on the rolling stool, taking my hand. "Your HCG levels are through the roof," she said gently. "You aren't going through menopause. Sarah, you're 10 weeks pregnant." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, a harsh, barking sound that bounced off the sterile walls. "That's impossible," I told her. "David and we're careful. We're old. My eggs are supposed to be dust." "Life finds a way," she said, her voice serious. "But Sarah, we need to talk about the reality. At 47, this is an extremely higher risk situation, for the baby and for you." I drove home in a daze, the ultrasound photo burning a hole in my purse. I sat in the driveway for an hour, watching the garage door, waiting for David to come out and ask me why I was late. But he didn't come out. When I finally walked inside, the kitchen was covered in brochures. "Look at this," David said, beaming as he held up a glossy pamphlet. "Tuscany. A villa rental for all of September. I put the deposit down today." Froze in the doorway, my hand instinctively going to my flat stomach. "September." I whispered yes. He said, coming over to hug me, "Tyler will be settled in his new job. The house will be on the market. It's our time, Sarah. Finally." He looked so happy. He looked 10 years younger. Just thinking about the burden of parenthood lifting off his shoulders, I looked at his face, so full of hope, and I made a choice that would haunt me for the next 6 months. I smiled and said, "It looks beautiful, David." I told myself I would tell him tomorrow. Then I said I'd tell him after the weekend. Then I decided I had to wait until the genetic testing came back, because surely at my age, something would be wrong, and nature would take its course. It sounds horrible to say, but a part of me was waiting for bad news, so I wouldn't have to be the one to break his heart. But the weeks ticked by. The genetic tests came back clean. The baby was healthy. It was a girl. We had 3 boys. And I had always, secretly, desperately wanted a daughter. When the nurse told me over the phone, "It's a girl," Sarah, I hung up and sat on my bathroom floor and wept. I cried for the daughter I wanted. And I cried for the husband I was deceiving by month 4. I couldn't button my jeans. I started wearing elastic-waist catering pants and baggy sweaters, telling David I was trying out a comfort chic style. He didn't notice. Why would he? He saw me as his wife of 25 years, the woman who was about to go to Italy with him. Not a vessel for new life, but the physical toll was getting harder to hide. One morning while making coffee, the smell of the grounds hit me so hard I had to sprint to the sink. David looked up from his iPad, frowned, and asked, "You okay?" "Stomach bug," I choked out, running the water to hide the sound of my heaving. "I think I ate bad shrimp at the event last night." "You need to slow down, Sarah," he said, shaking his head. "You're working yourself to death." "Just a few more months, honey. Then we retire." The guilt was eating me alive, growing just as fast as the baby. I started avoiding him. I went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, building a wall of pillows between us. That's how we wouldn't feel the baby kicking in the night. And she was a kicker. It was like she knew she was a secret, and she was fighting to be known. Then came the graduation invites. The ceremony was in June. I would be 6 months along. I looked at myself in the mirror sideways. I wasn't just thick anymore. I was clearly, undeniably pregnant. I bought a corset online, a dangerous, stupid thing to do, but I was panicked. I tried it on and nearly passed out from the pressure. I threw it in the trash and came up with a gown idea I had been asked to present. A small scholarship award at the ceremony because of my work with the local culinary school. I told the organizers I would need a faculty gown. Want to look official? I lied. The truth was, the gown was a tent. It was the only thing that could hide the Miracleland, the disaster. That was my body. That brings us back to the field, to David standing over me, the horror on his face. The paramedics arrived fast. I remember the siren wailing, cutting through the celebratory music of the graduation. I remember Tyler running over, his cap falling off, screaming, "Mom, Mom." And I remember David. He didn't get in the ambulance. I reached for him as they loaded the stretcher, my hand grasping at the air. "David!" I cried out. He was standing there, frozen, staring at my stomach as if it were a bomb that had just gone off. He looked at the paramedic, then at me, and he took a step back. I can't," he whispered, and he turned away. The doors slammed shut, and I was alone with a stranger checking my vitals. "BP is 160/100. The paramedic shouted into his radio. "We have a geriatric maternity patient. Possible preeclampsia, significant distress." I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. I woke up in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. There was a monitor beeping steadily to my left. I touched my stomach immediately. She was still there. I could feel the tightness. "You're awake," a voice said from the corner. It wasn't David, it was Tyler. He was sitting in the uncomfortable vinyl chair, still wearing his graduation tie, but his gown was gone. He looked so young, but his eyes were red. "Ty," I rasped, my throat feeling like sandpaper. "Where is?" "He's in the waiting room," Tyler said, his voice flat. "He's been pacing for 4 hours. Is the baby?" "The baby is fine," Tyler said. He stood up and walked over to the bed. He looked down at me, and for the first time in his life, he looked at me not as his mother, but as a flawed human being. "Mom," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell us?" I was scared, I whispered, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. I didn't want to ruin your plans. I didn't want to ruin Dad's life. Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you didn't ruin our plans. But watching Dad think you were dying, that ruined him. My heart stopped. What? He didn't know you were pregnant, Tyler said. When you collapsed, he thought you were having a heart attack. He thought he was losing you. Then he saw the stomach and he thought, honestly, I don't know what he thought. But he's terrified. Just then, the door pushed open. David stood there. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 4 hours. His tie was undone, his shirt rumpled. He didn't look angry. He looked shattered. Tyler squeezed my hand. I'll give you guys a minute. The door clicked shut behind him. The silence in the room was louder than the sirens had been. David walked over to the bed slowly, dragging his feet. He didn't sit down. He stood by the rail, gripping it with white knuckles. 6 months, he said softly. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry, David. I was going to tell you. Every time I tried, you looked so happy about Italy, about being free. He closed his eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. Do you think I care about Italy? He asked, his voice rising slightly. You think I care about a villa more than I care about you? You wanted to be done, I argued weakly. You had a countdown clock. That clock was for the stress, Sarah. He shouted, then caught himself, lowering his voice. It was for the tuition bills. It was for the late nights. It wasn't because I hate being a father. He reached out and finally touched my arm. When I saw you fall, he said, his voice breaking, I thought my life was over. And then I saw. He looked down at the sheet covering my stomach. Is it really ours? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I mean, medically. Is it okay? It's a girl, I said, and she's ours, and she's healthy. David stared at me, his mouth opened, then closed. A girl. I nodded. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. He put his head in his hands. I waited for the anger. I waited for him to tell me he was leaving, that he couldn't do diapers at 50, that he wanted a divorce. Instead, I saw his shoulders start to shake. He was crying, David. I reached for him. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I always wanted a girl, he choked out. You know that? I never said it because I loved the boys, but a girl. He placed a trembling hand on my stomach. But Sarah, he said, his expression hardening. You risked your life. The doctor said your blood pressure is lethal. You hid this, and you didn't get the help you needed because you were afraid of me. That was the knife twist. I felt like a monster, I admitted. A 40-year-old pregnant monster? You're not a monster, he said firmly. You're my wife. But we are not doing this alone anymore. No more secrets. If you feel a twinge, you tell me. If you're scared, you tell me. What about Italy? I asked. David let out a wet laugh. I guess we'll have to see if the villa has a crib. The relief was so intense I felt lightheaded, but the universe wasn't done with us yet. My blood pressure didn't go down. The stress of the reveal, the heat of the day and the months of hiding had taken a toll. 2 days later, Dr. Evans came in with a team of nurses. Sarah, she said, we can't wait anymore. Your liver enzymes are spiking. You have severe preeclampsia. We need to deliver today. She's only 26 weeks. I panicked. She's too small. We have given you steroids for her lungs, Dr. Evans said. But if we don't take her out now, we lose both of you. The next hour was a blur of bright lights and shouting voices. They wheeled me into the OR. David was there, dressed in blue scrubs, holding my hand so tight I thought he might break my fingers. I was shaking uncontrollably from the medication. Focus on me, David said, his eyes locking onto mine over the mask. Just look at me, Sarah. I felt pressure. Tugging. Then. Silence. Usually. In the movies, you hear a cry immediately. There was no cry. Why isn't she crying? I screamed. "David, why isn't she crying?" "They're working on her," David said, though I could see the terror in his eyes. "Just hold on." It felt like a lifetime. I lay there, cut open, staring at the ceiling, bargaining with God. Asterisk, take Italy. Take the house. Take my retirement. Just let her breathe. Asterisk then, a sound. It was tiny, like a kitten mewing. "She's breathing," a nurse shouted. "We have respiration." David slumped against my shoulder, sobbing into my neck. They didn't bring her to me. They rushed her straight to the NICU in a plastic box. I saw her for a second as they rolled past a tiny, red, impossible creature covered in wires. Smaller than a block of butter. I didn't get to hold her for 4 days. My recovery was brutal. My incision got infected. My blood pressure refused to stabilize. I lay in that hospital bed, pumped full of magnesium, feeling like a failure. But David was there every second. He was the one who went to the NICU and sent me videos. He was the one who learned how to change a diaper the size of a playing card. He was the one who called our friends, the ones we thought would judge us, and told them the news. And you know what happened? Nobody judged us. Well, maybe a few whispers at the grocery store later on, but in the moment, that mattered. Our friends showed up, they brought casseroles, they brought preemie clothes. They brought coffee for David. My son Tyler moved back home, not because he had to, but because he wanted to help. "You guys are too old to handle those 3 a.m. feedings alone," he joked. But I saw the way he looked at his tiny sister in the incubator. He was already in love. We named her Hope. It's a cliche, I know. But when you've given up on the idea of new beginnings, and then life hands you one wrapped in a terrifying, beautiful package, there's no other word that fits. Hope spent 3 months in the NICU. We brought her home on the day we were supposed to be flying to Tuscany. I sat on the front porch of the big house we didn't sell, rocking her in the glider David had dragged out there. The freedom countdown on David's phone was gone. Instead, his lock screen was a picture of Hope's tiny hand wrapped around his finger. I looked at him across the porch. He was reading a book on infant sleep cycles, wearing reading glasses, looking every bit of his 50 years. He looked up and caught me staring. "Regrets?" he asked. I looked down at the baby sleeping in my arms. My body was wrecked. I was exhausted. I would be nearly 70 when she graduated high school. "No," I said. "No regrets." "Me neither," he smiled. But here's the truth I want to leave you with, especially for the women out there who feel like they are carrying a secret shame. Fear convinces us that the people who love us will turn away when things get complicated. Fear tells us that we have to be perfect, or young, or on schedule to be worthy of support. I almost lost my life, and my daughter's life, because I was too afraid to trust my husband with the truth. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. Life rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes the detour is where the real life happens. If you've ever had to change your life plan in an instant, or if you've found joy in a place you never expected, tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one.